All right, hello and welcome. This is Mike Caldwell with another episode of the Transformative Principal Podcast, welcoming Bill Knous from Colorado. Bill, welcome.
Mike, thanks so much for having me on the show.
You bet. Hey, we're going to get into your background just shortly, but I thought we would just jump right into a couple rapid fire questions. Sometimes I save these to the end, but let's mix it up a little bit.
I love it.
Share a school visit or classroom moment you'll never forget.
There's a school in Durango, Colorado called Mountain Middle School, and they focus heavily on authentic performance tasks. And everybody who goes there, and the one time I was there, it is the most engaged students that I have found anywhere. Middle school is often the place where people either love it or don't. All school leaders know it's like, I'm a middle school person or I'm not. And I think a lot of middle schools that I visit tend to have solid compliance, but most people are like, the kids are just not that engaged. We're managing more behaviors than we are deep into thinking. And this is the one place, and again, they serve a very diverse population. They have kids fully bought in and motivated to perform on the authentic tasks that they've laid out. Kids are bummed to go on summer break. They're bummed to leave. And anytime I think of the best classrooms, it's the spaces where the leaders and the teachers have aligned on how to create the right type of environment that does not require constant adult input, but can really center what we might call intrinsic, even if some of the motivation is extrinsic, but real motivation, where students want to do the thing. I think some people might say like Alpha School might have tapped into that a little bit. And, there was a middle school that I saw in Colombia that had elements of that when it was doing outdoor learning. But Mountain Middle School, Durango, Colorado, for those of you that don't know it, Shane Voss is the school leader. Go and check it out. It is worth your time.
Well, I've been wanting to go to Durango, so now I have another reason to go. I've never been, other than the mountain biking and some of the, just beauty. Now I'll know.
Yeah.
What was the name of the school?
Mountain Middle School.
Mountain Middle School. Makes sense. Cool. Well, Bill, you currently serve as the Senior Director of Quality and Growth at the Colorado League of Charter Schools, but that's just one of many hats you're wearing currently. Obviously, in addition to that, you're a parent, and you're also a founder of a new micro school in Colorado as well. So very, very interesting. We'll get into kind of a lot of that and maybe the triangulation of all those things as well. But you began your career as a multilingual learner, teacher, before moving into school leadership and obviously in your statewide charter work. Let's talk about your history a little bit. What drew you into education? How did that path eventually lead you into the charter school growth and micro school design work that you're currently in?
I graduated from the University of Wyoming with a history degree, and everybody said, are you going to teach? And like a lot of young graduates, I was like, nope. I learned a lot about the world, and I went to go see it. So I moved to Australia and just worked and lived within that culture, and we built community there. And unfortunately, my dad, who's a very important part of my life, he got sick and he passed away around the same time. And so I had to come back early from that trip, and we got to say goodbye. We just talked about like, this is it. Like you gotta choose a thing. And so I was like, I never really loved school. I'm a proud graduate of Denver Public Schools, but I was like, I'm going to go and at least sub. And so I got a 4-day substitute job. For those of you that entered the career as subs, you know how fun that is to get your first short-term contract role. And I was a science teacher for an English language development classroom at Merrill Middle School in Denver, Colorado. And this is in fall of '06. So this is under an NCLB, right? No Child Left Behind era. And the students couldn't pronounce my last name. Mike, you did a great job today, Knous, but so I go by my middle name, Lee. And by that fourth day, I was a terrible teacher. Like in terms of setting up the conditions for students to make connections and to learn, it was really bad at that. But in terms of relationships and making kids feel seen and valued, I was like, I like this. I get energy from this. And the kids really, they were sad that I was going to leave that day. So I went and I talked to the principal and I was like, whatever jobs you have, I'm back. And then sure enough, because we all know what it means to run schools. And if you run schools, that means you have folks on leave. And I got 4 or 5 different long-term sub jobs, and then the next year they hired me on full time to teach in an ELD classroom. And it was the most formative work. Now, again, in hindsight, I was not a good teacher at all. I cannot say that I genuinely helped those students make significant language or learning gains in the areas that I wanted to, but I did help them build curiosity, and we did build relationships. I've gone to some of their weddings. A couple of them are now teachers themselves now. And that relational part of it for me, I was like, that's just a core function of education, right? Kids want to have healthy relationships with adults. They want to see themselves in different lights and professions and role models. And so I tapped into that.
All right, as we were talking, we got cut off by some technology issues, but you were subbing, kind of found your stride, really connecting with kids, building relationships, and in some way that led you to leading, as a senior director at the Colorado League of Charter Schools,
Yeah.
opening a
Yeah.
micro school. So build the bridge. How did we get there?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple more chapters to this story.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I was very good at connecting with my students that English was their bridge language, right? So these were students from Eastern, Western, Central Africa, students from the Balkans, from very, very rural parts of Southeast Asia, and the only way they could communicate was through English. But then I also had a lot of Spanish speakers, and they had a linguistic bridge, and I had a very hard time trying to manage a classroom, build engagement with them, and really build really strong literacy skills by the end of my second year. So, I had stopped my world traveling and learning. My dad had transitioned, and I was like, he wanted me to do this, I'm going to go do it again. And so I went and I got a job teaching abroad in Spain. And I was placed in a really tiny village called Fiñana, which is it's really in the middle of nowhere, but you cannot get there unless it's about an hour car drive from any major city. The first day that I was there, I met my wife, and we were crossing a street called La Gran Via de Colón. La Gran Via is the same name as our micro school.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we literally
I
met
think
each
when
other.
I was searching for Gran Via, I think something in Spain showed up first, and it's like, no, Gran Via,
100%,
Colorado.
yeah.
So okay, carry on.
Yeah. And so for your listeners, right, who've spent time abroad, I don't know. We just think that learning very much is a nonlinear pathway. You talk to any one person about what they remember about their K-12 or even their K-16 schooling experience. It's excursions, it's things outside the classroom, and all of the knowledge that aggregates into skills and experiences and heuristics is not formed through one-size-fits-all models, in our belief. So we, again, met in this very romantic, fortuitous way. We're still married today. We have 2 young boys. It is not hyperbole to say it did change my life and our lives, crossing that street together. So we spent that year. The educational experience was somewhat formative, but it was more just about the immersing in culture, building the linguistic background. So then I came back, and I taught here at the New America School, which our current Governor Jared Polis founded. It was a charter school, and I taught there for a year. And then I was like, my wife, my fiance at the time, she had moved back to Philly, where she's from, and I was like, we have to be together. And so I moved to Philly for 2 years, and I taught in Philly public schools. I went to Villanova. And that was extremely formative, right? For anybody who's ever served in Philly public schools, right? Those amazing kids and families and amazing staff, and a really, really hard to navigate system that is rife with corruption and incompetence. And it's not the people. That is a truly, it's a system that I do not believe that any system that functions like that can effectively serve a wide range of kids.
Yeah.
So these experiences just kept informing us. And, we, at the time, the job market was really hard. I guess this is 2011 or something. And we both have master's degrees. She was at UPenn, I was at Nova. And we were like, we have to go abroad again because we can't get jobs here in Philly, even though we were already plugged into the system. And we ended up going to a little city called Manizales in Colombia in South America. So for those of your international folks that know the international circuit, right, it's a part of the Big 12 down there. And so really great school, and we had a really good visionary director, Dr. Robert Sims, who currently leads the Eastern Association of International School Authorizers right now. Dr. Sims, if you're listening, can't wait to talk to you again soon, sir. he brought us down there, and it was just an incredibly formative experience. My teaching, that was the best years I ever had. I just got a text message this morning from a student who just got the highest honor from Columbia University's architecture program.
Very cool. Very cool.
I'm tempted to read it to you, but I'll save it for another time, Mike. But it's that
Feel
was really
free to
really
read
formative.
it if you would like.
Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's do this for anybody who gets these things from your former
No,
students.
those
It's
are
just so cool.
huge. Yeah, those are
Yeah.
huge.
So this is from Valeria Ramirez, and I know you all can't see this, but I'm just verifying this for Mike. That
Yep,
this is
legit.
a real thing, friends.
Verified.
This is
Yep.
legit. Said, hey, Mr. Knous, I just want to share with you that I graduated from my master's at Columbia and I won the highest prize of my program. I still cannot believe it. Feels like yesterday that we were speaking about my plans of coming and how I didn't even know I was going to make it. And here I am now. And yeah, she just wanted to share it. And so
Love that. Love that.
yeah, right. Just like, and look, anybody who's ever served, like we all have those stories. Like you make those connections, but those years I got really, really good at building essential questions, at building units where kids really had to think. I taught like 5 different grade levels, right? I taught U.S. history, world history, geopolitical affairs. I taught the AP course. It was a ton of work. And then because of that, I had developed a lot of leadership and a lot of relationships, and my school asked me to move into leadership, and they said, why don't you take on the secondary school principal job? And I think I'm like 31 or something at the time, and I was like, this is a mistake. Like you all have to know that I'm really bad at things for a couple of years. It's going to take me a while, but it's a very communal place, and they were like, we believe in you. And it was a very, very formative experience. Again, just like Merrill Middle School, Mike, that first year of principalship, I feel so bad for the people that were on the other side of my leadership. Just, like
It probably
like
wasn't
weekend
as
stinks.
bad as you think.
No. I don't know. Certain people I think are really train up for jobs. I had always just sort of learned through doing, and unfortunately, I think we all make mistakes in education, and that's just again part of the nonlinear Gran Via. I think that is a part of each of our journeys. Second year, I got a lot better, stronger planning, stronger relationships, better execution. We overhauled the schedule, increased the AP classes, built in a competency-based assessment system. I mean, it was a ton of work.
Wow.
And it was really, really important. We had some things happen at home and we really wanted to stay, but we were like, I think it's time to come home.
Yeah.
So came back here in 2017, led at DSST Public Schools for 6 years through the pandemic. DSST, for those of you who don't know, is the Denver School for Science and Technology. It is one of Colorado's highest performing college and career focused STEM networks. It's a charter network. They currently have 16 campuses. It's not a job. Like, it is an occupation. It is serious work. And again, I was not very good at it for the first year, and I got really good at it by the past couple of years. And we started our family, and we kept talking about this micro school the whole time. And then maybe I'll pause before I get into that. But we had essentially spent almost 10 years in classrooms, almost 8 years in leadership, and then was like, I think it's time to do something a little bit different at the ecosystem level, and then start to pilot our idea.
Yeah.
So that's
Love
mostly what brought me up to this point in my career.
Yeah, love the journey. What a broad, I guess diverse kind of set of experiences, from even going back to your experience in Australia before you got into teaching and international schools, and then having the experience to lead a high performing school in Colorado. That's pretty impressive. So let's shift gears a little bit. A lot of people may or may not know kind of what a micro school is. So let's maybe start there. What it seems like it's not new, but it seems like it's growing in traction across the U.S. the micro school movement. And then specifically, what is the approach that you're taking with Gran Via as a micro school?
I love the question. I'm sure that your listeners are going to be able to do better justice. I have not read, and the best thought leaders in this space, I don't think we have a singular agreed upon definition of a micro school, other than there's agreement that it is smaller in scale. When we think about the economics behind what it takes to run any type of educational institution, public or privately funded, that is certainly a core element of a micro school. I think the other thing is that most micro schools are very much responsive to or generated by community demand. Not that larger schools can't be. And the last thing I would say is micro schools are certainly not new. I mean, you go back. I've been learning more about this. It is crystal clear that the one room schoolhouse in itself is probably the earliest form of micro school for those
Yeah,
folks
no
who've
kidding.
researched it,
Yeah.
right? Right. And then even like the sort of renaissance of it, which may appear somewhere in the 70s, but folks have been thinking about how to create scalable, sustainable micro schools for years. I think for us at Gran Via, what we have encountered and what it means to be a micro school within like our context, you look at an organization like Vela, sorry, and they've done so much great work to incubate. We were actually a recipient of a Vela grant this past year, which is a huge step for us. It's so nice to have an organization that believes in you and says, we see what you're doing for families and how bought in you have families into this model.
Can you clarify,
But
Bill, when you say Vela for our audience? What is
Yeah,
Vela? What kind of organization?
Vela is a national. I'm going to get this wrong, but it's like a national microfunding organization that explicitly focuses on grants of up to $10,000 for small, micro, community-driven models. And they have a couple key elements they're looking for. They want to see, right, that families have skin in the game, that families are bought in. They want to see that it's sustainable. They want to see that it's serving a unique element and need. They're also funding things that aren't just solely about direct service delivery to kids, but within their portfolio. They went from a handful of grants pre-pandemic. Now they have 5,000 different schools under their portfolio and hundreds of those that they funded.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that to your question, I think is this at a national level in a post-pandemic world where a lot of families are saying like the local one-size-fits-all thing is not a good fit for me and my kid. And whatever their reasons are, those are almost too vast to even create like containers for.
Yeah, right.
But invariably, the through line into all of that is that it's about trust and relationships and what they're looking for their kids. And in most educational contexts, there is still not enough high quality choice for families.
So micro schools typically 5 to 20 students. I mean, it's kind of varies, right? And oftentimes, yeah, it is kind of an extension of the homeschool, maybe kind of structure potentially. How are they funded? I mean, are they private schools, public,
Yeah.
a little bit of
Yeah.
both?
This is I'm certainly not an expert, but I've been spending a lot of time in this space here in Colorado. So the answer I would give to that really good question is if you look at states that have vouchers or ESAs, educational savings accounts, right, and that's growing around the country, there is a state-supported public funding mechanism that re-empowers families to use a specific dollar amount to fund their child's education in a way rather than sending them to their locally zoned school. And in those places, you've seen an explosion of micro schools that are doing 4 or 5 days a week, in a wide range of what they're focusing on. But they're still focusing on literacy and math in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
In a place like Colorado and other states that do not have ESAs or vouchers, we have a different funding mechanism that is called part-time enrichment funding or homeschool enrichment funding. And that part-time funding is really interesting because it's been going through lots of changes. So essentially what it qualifies for is that it's half of the local per pupil revenue. So call that approximately about $10,000 a kid. It's more than that right now. But just for the listener's sake of understanding, and it equates to approximately $5,000 per student. It's not very regulated, but that's undergoing changes as we speak. If anybody Googles anything about part-time enrichment funding in Colorado, there's articles upon articles and lots of strong opinions to read about it. But the state is essentially looking at ways to ensure that that money is going to high-quality educational options and not just funding any random enrichment idea under the sun. The other way is all privately funded. What's really interesting here in Colorado is that we have a long history of micro schools, especially here in the urban area. What we don't have a lot of good examples of is sustainable micro schools. So here's the predominant narrative that people have told me who are further along in the game. Again, and for your listeners, Gran Via has been serving families since 2020, and we built very, very small. So we got 2 4.0 fellowships. 4.0 is a little catalyzer incubator that runs out of New Orleans. and we got their tiny fellowship and their essentials fellowship. And that money allowed us to pressure test the idea of would families be interested in outdoor programming focused on real social and emotional focus, call it mindfulness, call it like understanding self, other, and world. And we found that families very much wanted that. And so we literally went from 6 kids to 8 kids to running camps to then serving families in a tiny fee-for-service model with caregivers and kids there, to now we're serving 30 students multiple days per week. And we just got authorization to become a full-time charter school through the Colorado Charter School Institute, what's called CSI here in Colorado. So Gran Via built this very, very slow pathway to becoming a publicly funded, sustainable model, because a lot of micro school operators, just like businesses, close down within 7 years.
Yeah.
It's very easy to fund. It's very hard to sustain.
Were there times since 2020 that you didn't think it was going to be able to sustain itself, or do you have any of those kind of critical moments? It's like, are we going to be able to open tomorrow or next week or next year?
Yeah, I mean, we like to lead with honesty and transparency. We just think that the more that we're like really sharing the reality, that we can equip people to make better decisions. And also, we want people who want to support us. And so one of the really honest things I would lead for your listeners, Mike, is we didn't get paid to pressure test the model for 4 years. So to your question, yeah, I mean, basically every month we're like, how could we possibly have a sustainable living and raise a family? So we've always had to keep this as a part-time nights and weekends idea. Mm-hmm. And that's like, there's like a real interesting tension there.
Yeah, sure.
Of how do you make something real for kids and families unless you go all in on it? Mm-hmm. And so luckily my wife is extremely talented. Again, she, holds multiple degrees from Penn and is a trained mindfulness educator and is the opposite of me in all the great ways that we need to have equilibrium and balance in our relationship and our life. But I don't know how we would do it without both of us. So what's unique about Gran Via is it's a co-founded model, not like a singular founder model. I do think a lot of micro schools tend to be sole founders. Not all, but many. Mm-hmm. And just I'll give you one more example because I think it's a good question. So we've worked for the last, again, years to build this model that would be sustainable. So we got the approval to become a homeschool enrichment funded micro school starting in the fall of 25. And it was a big deal for us. And we had to recruit families. And we got funded for 13 families, and we were serving 25 within a month. So we had way more families than we had funding for. And we said, we will be a tuition-free, public, and open to all model, because that is what is core to our mission and our beliefs. When we started with our board, we were like, we're going to have $3,000 in reserves. And we've been so judicious in our management of our fiduciary responsibilities that we're now on track to carry $50,000 in reserves this first year.
Wow.
Which is great for a little micro school, right? Yeah. So we're in a very healthy budgetary position. We also invested a ton of time and money with my board to go through a very intensive process with the local school district to get what's called a release of exclusive chartering authority, lots of technical terms for your listeners, to this Charter School Institute, which is the only authorizer in the state that really understands micro schools. That happened on Tuesday of this past week, and we were riding high, and we were crying. We were like,
congratulations.
We can serve more families. Thank you. But then on Wednesday, our legislature passed an amendment that essentially caps our funding for next year at 13, even though we have 30 families on our books. So we now have a $90,000 delta we have to close.
Oh, boy.
But here's what is interesting to us. We have always said it's a nonlinear path. And siempre decimos que abre una vía, which in Spanish means we will find a way. So our charge now is that we are going to figure out a different authorizing structure, work with the state, and figure out the funding mechanism. And if we can't, we're going to fundraise our way, but we will not turn families away. And so this is just like a little window into the leadership mindset that we believe that we have to take into this so that we can turn it into the only thing that we do. So my wife finally, Gran Via, is healthy enough that she'll be able to go full-time into it next year. She's been working as an MTSS coordinator at a local called the Denver Language School. It's a prominent multilingual school here. I'm going to retain my role at the Colorado League because I'm still doing very important work for another year. And then maybe we'll be in a position next year to fully pivot and bring me on, maybe like a 0.4 sort of like fractional ED until we have 60 students, and then it'll be a full-time job, and ideally it'll survive beyond our time.
Good work. Good work. Yeah, such a, I mean, parallel, if you're a startup founder or whether it's education or whatever, very, very similar. I mean, you got to just keep grinding until and find a way, right? And that's what you're doing. It looks like you see the light to make it happen, but I love that your commitment to the vision of what you're doing and not turning families away that want to be part of it, and that's so important, and that'll eventually lead to success. Well, it's already leading to success. I'm curious what you think. Why do you believe more families, are actively seeking these smaller, more personalized public education options right now?
I've tried to answer this so many times, and I feel like I miss it every time. I think what feels challenging about this is I run the montage of the 100+ families that we've served and we've talked to. We've built a form of a relationship where we know something about what's going on in their personal lives and what they're looking for their kids. The simplest answer maybe is that everyone wants something that doesn't exist within the larger system, including within what Gran Via can offer. And if I were to pull that back, or maybe go like a click deeper into that and then look for themes, there are a lot of families of students who they would likely describe their kids as being neurodivergent, diagnosed or undiagnosed. And I think you go into any kindergarten classroom. I did a ton of school visits this year. And in high Title I schools, low FRL schools, urban schools, suburban schools, rural schools, there was this trend of kindergartners, preschoolers, and first graders, and people being like, whoa, we've never seen these behaviors. Why is our system not set up for this? And all of the systems around MTSS and SPED and 504, everything within your traditional system, public and private and otherwise, that takes federal law, state law, and applies it to what families deserve, we actually still believe is a Band-Aid for the root gap that systems are not designed to serve all learners. Because they're funded and they're designed for the compliance and the efficiency for the adults, not for the individualization of the students. Now, there are exceptions to this. Those are probably private more than not. And then therefore, they're not equitable and accessible to all families. And so one of the things we just continue to reconcile with, and we don't have a solution for it yet, but we spend as much time as we physically can with families to listen and say, what do you, like, when your kid is their best, when they're not? And I think all schools do this, but we do it again, and then we'll call families and be like, today we didn't think it went so well. What did your learner say? Give us some feedback. And slowly they'll open up and they'll really start to give us feedback. They have a really hard time when they show up in the first 5 minutes and no one checks in on them. When they're trying to self-advocate for themselves and they get brushed off. I mean, these little micro moments, and the more that we've tried to attune our program to those little itty bitty moments that might happen in seconds in a learner's early part of their day, it changes the trajectory. Mm-hmm. And I actually think our program is a super long way to go. Like Gran Via is nowhere near the exceptional model that we want it to be in the next 10 years, but the ability to respond to what families are asking, and then this idea of like neurodivergence, again, particularly for the undiagnosed, I think any school leader knows this. Like, you are talking to families, they're telling you, why does nobody get this? Why do I have to wait for all these things? How come this is happening? And if you're having to manage this big system, it is very, very challenging to be nimble and responsive to that. So what we're most intrigued about is how do we scale the micro part where we keep the relationship super tight so the degrees of separation between decision and stakeholder are very, very tight, while also making it sustainable. And we don't actually know how to do that yet, but we're going to find a way because it's almost like Gran Via, and like that is our path.
Yeah. Well, I think you articulated the answer really well. So if you're looking for how many times you've answered the question, I think you nailed it on that one. I think you nailed it. Very well done. Yeah. A lot of times you hear, and I don't have the charter background that you do. I've been in everywhere, public, traditional public, and just work with charter school leaders more recently. But you often hear kind of questions about accountability and, where maybe whether it's private or charter or whatever, they have, maybe more room for innovation and more flexibility or autonomy, but then they're questioned on the accountability piece. one of the messages or kind of things I've heard from you or learned from you is that innovation and accountability can coexist and oftentimes do. Um, I'm curious on your take on how can public education create more room for innovation while still maintaining strong accountability for students, families, etc.
Yeah. I appreciate this question, and I will prepare. I've growingly stronger opinions about this as I engage with a lot of decision makers and who are superintendents who sit on local boards here in Colorado, some of which actually in neighboring states, and how they're thinking about this idea to the same question of like, how do we serve all these families? How do we innovate? But how do we do it within the constraints, particularly of declining enrollment? And so here's the answer I would give as it relates to accountability. I believe strongly that one of the biggest things that we repeatedly see is that even for people that work in charter schools or have worked in charter schools, they still are not able to know and say that charter schools, by law, are tuition-free, public, and open to all. The other thing most people are unaware of is that charter schools have to go through very, very intensive renewal periods every 3 to 5 years. Your traditional public schools do not have to do that. And in fact, at least here in Colorado, I can name any number of examples of schools that have been habitually low performing, not for a year or 5 years or 10 years, for generations. Generations. Where grandparent, parent, and child have all gone to the exact same school and it has had the exact same outcomes. It's measured by graduation rates, by literacy and proficiency, and by college access. How I think a lot about this is, what is the purpose and how do we measure it? In many ways, I would actually posit that charter schools have lost a lot of their innovative step. Somewhat of that is a leadership challenge where people are falling into the compliance bucket of just checking the boxes without really thinking about, what is my charge? What is my mission? How do I motivate and influence these people around me to do that? It's very hard work for anybody who's doing it. You know, you're 60 to 100 hours a week nonstop and very intense, but that is a life-changing motivation to have that. In traditional district schools, when I'm there, again, I believe that they're filled with great people, some very strong educators, but that system is designed to create predictable compliance for the adults. It is not designed to push the boundary on what's possible for kids. And if it is, then show me the data. Here in Colorado, we continue to see that Black and Latino students that qualify for free and reduced lunch, if you attend a charter school versus not, you're talking about performance deltas in our state assessments of like 16 to 24 points for third and eighth graders. You aggregate that year over year, that matters for kids. Like, no one is satisfied with literacy rates in the country, or at least we shouldn't be. And charter schools have not solved for that. But at least here in Colorado, we have irrefutable data that's been verified by the Credo study that came out of Stanford that statistically, by and large, if you are attending a green charter school, you are having year over year measurably better outcomes and gains and more days of learning than you are if you're not. And I don't actually think it's the quality of the teachers. I think it's about the design of the system.
Well, that leads me to my next question. If you could redesign one aspect of the system to better support all schools, traditional, charter, whatever, and maybe it's instilling some things that are working well for the charter space, or you could even go as far as the private schools, and like what are those things that we're not blending or bringing over to the traditional model that would make a difference in the system design?
Yeah, I actually think my hunch is that most listeners would agree, except if you're a lawmaker, and then I think that you probably hate what I'm about to say. But here's some. I don't know if this is. I need to think more through this, but this is my belief. When I look at, let's go back to the example I gave you about Mountain Middle School, right? You asked about like what's the best sort of learning environment you've seen. When I constantly think about why, and I'm telling people that why, I think there is something about what the system is designed to do for motivation for children. So let's put it into like simple math. There's approximately 42,000 to 64,000 instructional minutes that will happen for a given student in a given year. Year over year over year. To what ROI? And no one, like if you're a parent, if you're an educator, I know in my bones that every single person can think of 1,000 examples of a child being like, ugh, I don't want to go, or I don't want to do that, or like, do I have to?
Mm-hmm.
And you look at any educational environment, public, private, but that's started to shift how we think about what's required and what directs and generates motivation. You cannot take a young child's brain and compel seat time and then expect that you're going to get equal outcomes. Like, it is crazy to me that we are still measuring seat time across most all of our 50 legislative bodies as the primary way in which we're going to hold schools accountable. And why do we do that? Because it is easy to track.
100%.
And it's BS. It is BS because it's not designed with kids in mind. And so to pull one other thread through, when we talk to those parents who are like, my kid's neurodivergent, mostly what they're saying is my kid can't sit still all day, which is why our outdoor program is a current fit for them for some time, may not be in a while. But there is something about this notion of like, we cannot treat the human developing brain like it is just going to be the static seat for that many minutes every single year over and over and over for consistency and predictability and call that good enough. At some point that has to break. Now, I actually think most schools would do it, like district schools too, but no one can because the law says, and then our funding follows that. And that is the thing that if we said we're going to do 5 years and we're going to get rid of seat time, go after outcomes. How do you want to measure them? If you're not going to use our way, prove it. I know it's messy. I know that we don't know how to track funding. I know that people are going to take advantage of the system. What else are we going to do? The exact same thing we've done for 150 years? I mean, they're just, it's like at what point in American history is a group of us going to get together at serious levels across the decision-making spectrum that are legislative, that are local, and say we are going to invest in serious pilots that break the system. We're not going to hold everybody accountable to something that we can check a box around. And if you redesign systems that actually motivate kids, they'll do it. Kids are full. Everybody knows this, that kids are fully capable, which is why every school, last thing I'll posit here, every school has one or more classrooms that are exceptional, right? Even the low performing schools. There's always, it's like in that classroom, kids learn. Why? Because they've done something even within that imperfect container where they've started to press the rules and shifted the motivational structure. They have the relationships and kids are bought in. Probably not to the level that they could be in a better structure, but it's better than it is in the remainder of those environments. And if all of those things are even remotely true, Mike, maybe one of your listeners is like, that's it, let's go blow it up. We need to blow up seat time requirements at state and district levels and give true autonomy for innovation. Because otherwise what you're going to have is like you'll have the alpha-like schools that are only going to be accessible to a tiny portion of the learning population, and that is inequitable.
Yep.
So we have to figure out something, because I appreciate what they're doing. Like they're also tapping into this idea of like, how do you generate motivation? And it's like, you can't pay kids, you can't just let kids do that. Well, why not? Why? Because when all of us leave school, what do? Right? What have you done in your career? What have all of our listeners done? Nobody took a standard linear path after K-12 like we had the linear path when we were there. So everyone knows the system is incongruent. Everybody can point out flaws. But if there is one thing that I think is worth blowing up, blow up the seat time requirement. Let's do it for 10 years, maybe a generation, and let's see what happens.
I'm down. Let's do it. Yeah, whoever's listening, let's make this happen. I agree.
Come on, somebody. Yeah, email me and let's talk. Yeah.
I agree with it. And earlier you were talking about, the design of the system, and I'm paraphrasing based on my own recollection, so it's a, quasi paraphrase, but is designed for the adults and not the students. And as you're talking about that, I'm thinking I think of the adults as the lawmakers that are where sometimes it's convenient because we can say this we have this metric that we're holding schools accountable for, but is it actually making a difference in quality? And no, it's not, but it's easy to measure across the system, and seat time is a really good example of that. I agree with you on the seat time issue and relieving that constraint or making that change. Well, we're running out of time. There's a billion other questions I'd love to ask you. I'm really intrigued now to go to that school in Colorado, and I'd love to come visit your Gran Via school as well sometime. What
Yeah,
is it?
we'd
Denver
love to.
area,
Yeah,
I assume. Is that
we currently operate out of a couple parks. The primary park we operate is just south of the Denver area. It's called Westlands Park.
okay?
We do have multiple locations that we're propping up in the next couple of years, so be sure to email me before you come out. But we'd love to have you out.
That'd be cool. That'd be really cool. Um,
Yeah.
so maybe two last questions. Despite the challenges that we've talked about with public education or just in education in general, I think there's a lot of challenges going around. What currently gives you the most hope about the future of education, whether it's in Colorado or nationally?
I continue to be pretty intrigued by what, like, I actually don't know how to define generations, by the way, but when I think about the generation or generations of kids that are currently experiencing the schooling system, and slowly how the paradigm is maybe tilting in a slightly different course, and I think about tipping points, it would not surprise me if there is what later generations describe as a serious shift in the whole of education. And it's not driven by adults and lawmakers, contrary to my prior example. It'll be driven by the folks that experienced a system. And I'm thinking about kids that were experienced the pandemic, were born during the pandemic, who are growing up with narratives of like neurodivergence and there's got to be third and fourth and fifth ways and I can find different learning environments. Like I'm not sure that we've seen this many families and this many things pop up within the whole of the space. And a lot of proponents of like traditional public education see this as like an attack and it's all going to fall apart. And I think that's a misframing because it assumes that it's like an external enemy who's trying to break it. And that's not true. Like talk to families, spend time with families, go, I always say dwell with people. We let like eat in their homes, use their bathrooms. They're not like live in the human condition with them. And then like rethink about what you're hearing. And I just continue to hear that families know that no one's going to come and save them and they're going to find a way or they're going to do it on their own and their kids are growing up with that narrative. So maybe by 2050, we do see something and it comes from kids, right? Which is always my favorite thing, right? I think about my alumni who just got the highest degree, you know, and when I think about her in 10th grade, she was smart and capable, but she's made serious steps to go from this little city in Colombia to getting the highest honor at Columbia University here in New York. And that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, you can always trust in a next generation to be like, nah, we're not gonna do the same thing. And that for me just gives me a lot of energy to think about how to support them and serve with them, to be a part of something that could be meaningful for future generations.
Absolutely. Yeah, well said. Well, last question that we usually end on is what does it mean to you to be a transformative principal?
I think about how to measure what that would mean and the best leadership I've ever experienced and the few times I believe that people have experienced it that I may have gotten there. It was about the ability to influence and motivate a very, very diverse group of people across backgrounds, ages, around a singular mission. And then to help them shift their mindsets from we can't because to 1% a day, small steps like that incremental progress.
Yes.
If we had more time, there's some leaders here in Colorado. Almost all are women, not surprisingly, and they're just phenomenal. Like I would follow each one of them into an abyss if they called me right now and they're like, we have to do something really hard. And when I think about transformative leadership, it was their ability to like be the vision holder, the communicator, the relationship builder, and then to steward this thing where I just remember sitting in rooms being like 6 months ago, all these people were like, this can't work. And now they're like, we can do this. And I'm going to retire at this job. And these were, so like anytime I think about the influence and motivation piece of leadership, that's what most resonates with me when I think about it being transformative.
Love it. Love it. Very cool. Well, Bill, thank you so much for being part of this podcast today. I feel like we could have a part 2 and a part 3. There's a lot more questions that I have on my list that we didn't get to.
Yeah.
And for our listeners wondering, why does Mike keep interviewing all these charter school type people? It's because I've sent invites to even your traditional public school leaders and association leaders, and the charters are the ones that are responding. So, Bill, thanks for responding. For those of you that are listening and maybe want to be on the podcast, reach out to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you as well. But Bill, so much good work happening on your end in Colorado. So thanks for the work that you do, and look forward to watching kind of what happens with the Gran Via micro school as you continue to develop that. So good work, and thanks again for being on the show.
Mike, thanks so much for having me. Take good care.